Hello and welcome everyone. This is your astrology forecast for new moon solar eclipse in Leo that is happening on the 12th of August. And this is the first eclipse in Leo that is opening new 18-year cycle that is going to be happening in the next year and a half in the signs of Leo and Aquarius. And the last time we had eclipses in Leo and Aquarius was 2008 and 2009. So it's really powerful, and these eclipses always unlock something that is life-changing for us, especially for those who have strong Leo and Aquarius positions, or those who have strong fixed signs positions, Scorpio and Taurus, besides Leo and Aquarius, because these will be making challenging squares. And eclipses are not something negative or bad, they are just here to bring us back on the track if we have taken some wrong turns, if we have been misled or misguided by our fake personality. Eclipse is here to bring us back to our soul's path and our soul's journey. And this eclipse, eclipses in general are felt many weeks before and many weeks after their exact date. So we have already been in eclipse season during July, and this is going to be felt throughout September as well, because we have another eclipse. And this one will be the closing one, the closing chapter of Pisces Virgo eclipses that began in September of 2024. But I'll talk more about that in the next video. That will be about eclipse in Pisces around the end of August. But this one is opening new cycle. It's new moon, but it's South Node eclipse. And South Node represents our past. It is something we have to let go of. So it's something that we've outgrown, something that pulls us back from our destiny, something that pulls us back from what we are supposed to move towards. And the North Node is in Aquarius. So this is not about living fully this Leo part in us, but releasing the part in us that is blocking our true self-expression, that is blocking our connection with the heart, that is blocking our creative potential. And I'll talk more about this in the video, what is blocking us when it comes to Leo and what we need to move towards when it comes to Aquarius North Node. And eclipses are big turning points in our lives, and we will all be feeling it collectively. And since this is Leo, it's the first fire sign, so we may be experiencing, big heats, big fires, probably, as always during the Leo season. But now it's eclipse, so we can expect some even bigger themes of fire. But I always love to say that what we see outside in this world is a direct reflection of what we all carry within us. So there is some ongoing big fire within us, and we may have been ignoring that fire, that alarm, and now we have to really wake up and to see what this fire needs from us. And where is this fire in us, and how we can transform this fire. And fire is a very powerful element in many ways. It's multi-layered, just as any other element, but fire is initiatory. And Leo is next, besides Cancer, the most personal sign, because it's ruled by the sun. And the sun is really the king of the zodiac, as the Leo is the king of animals, right? So we may be confronted with our own self-grandeur complexes, where we want to be treated as kings or queens, where we need to be admitted, applauded, recognized, honored just for being who we are. And okay, I'll go to that later, but now I just wanted to say something about eclipses, that they are really profoundly mysterious events that no scientific knowledge can truly explain logically. And you know, we understand perfectly well why and how it happens. You know, we know the geometry of the sun, the moon, and the earth. We know the calculations, and we can calculate things centuries in advance. And that's really powerful, but there is that mystery that science cannot explain in this way that they are trying to explain by proofs and theories. It's something that we just feel and know. And you know, when daylight begins to fade in the middle of the afternoon, there is something very ancient that is being awakened inside our human psyche. And you know, eclipses definitely impact all of us beings, including trees, animals, and all other living organisms. These eclipses are like reset points, and this is a time when, you know, birds can become confused and we can hear them, their song differently. Animals can change their behavior and they can act a bit weird too during eclipses. And the air itself seems different. You know, people instinctively look forward towards the sky, and this is when our bodies remember something that our logical, rational mind keeps forgetting. And eclipses are events that really have the power to interrupt the rhythm of time itself. And new moon plants a seed, but eclipse does something that is much stranger and mysterious. It can bend the time, it can bend the storyline, and it reminds us that time is non-linear. Just as we are, we have no beginning nor end. We are not some you know, linear existence that was born at this point and then lives and then dies. No, really. And eclipses are here to show us that mystical side of our existence. And you know, the Greek word eclipses, I am not sure now, but for eclipse, it literally means abandonment or a failure to appear. And you know, this is not the moment that when the sun has died, but the light, this is the time when for us it appears as if the sun is gone, or like the light is gone, but the light is not gone. It withdraws from our sight, but it's there. And this is a time when we reconnect with our inner light and inner flame. So this is a time when life removes something that we thought defines us, because we have unconsciously confused our identity with the role that we are playing. And this eclipse takes place in Leo. So, you know, Leo is often introduced only through themes of confidence, leadership, charisma, desire to shine, to be the main person, to be at the center of the stage. But, you know, of course, those qualities definitely belong to Leo, but they are only the visible branches of something much older. And Leo is associated with the sun itself. So the sun really doesn't ask who deserves its light, right? And it shines over everything equally. It shines over kingdoms and ruins. It shines over oceans and deserts. It shines over saints and tyrants as well. And it does it with the same generosity. But, you know, it doesn't negotiate its radiance. It doesn't calculate whether someone has earned its warmth. It simply expresses its own nature. You know, it is what it is, and it does it authentically. And it's not trying to become light, because it's already light. And during this solar eclipse, many of us may begin questioning how much of our lives have been lived from this place of true radiance. And we all perform to some degree. We all have to agree about this. We all perform to some degree. But the question is how aware we are of those performances, or do we totally identify and forget our true selves and believe that we are this performance. And we perform, strength, spirituality, intelligence, independence, success, even kindness. Yes, many times we perform kindness. And this new moon solar eclipse in Leo may face us with where we are performing, especially kindness. And we learn very early which parts of ourselves receive approval. Without even realizing it, we begin nurturing and nourishing and polishing that part of ourselves, that version of ourselves. And this becomes even more significant because this is a south node eclipse, and south node, we may connect it with loss, with bad karma or punishment, but the lunar nodes are known as the dragon's head and the dragon's tail. Neither is considered evil because both belong to the same living creature. And the head gathers experience. That's the north node, that's Rahu in Vedic science. But the tail releases what is done with its lesson, what has completed its purpose, what we are finished with. And one inhales, the other exhales. And this is, opening of the chapter. The north node is opening the chapter while the south node is closing it. But without the one, the other cannot exist, just like every other polarity in this existence. So the south node is not there to remove something because it's wrong. It removes something that is done with its lesson. So we are asked now to remove something because it's south node in order to step into a new chapter of 18 years of being more creative, being more connected with our heart, being more connected with that innocence within us that we forgot about, with the child within us, with being childlike, not like ignorant children, but with this awareness that we have now, choosing to be childlike and being more spontaneous. And the most essential connection related to Leo is our connection with the heart, our relationship with the heart. And it's not we are not talking about the physical organ that is doing the thing with our blood in our body, but it's the symbolic center of human consciousness. And the Upanishads, they describe a small chamber within the heart where the whole universe resides. And the Sufi teachings speak about polishing the heart until it becomes capable of reflecting the divine. Just like early Christians and Christian mystics from Gnosticism, they wrote about descending into the heart from the restless mind. So this is relocation. We are relocating our mind into the heart. It's not about abandoning the mind. It's not about ignoring the mind, but bringing them together. And Leo is the heart, Aquarius is the mind. They are opposites, but they work together. And opposites, the symbol of opposition is like the symbol of infinity. So this is that kind of union within the polarity. And there's this great tale of Christian Andersen's story of the Emperor's New Clothes. And this story, I think, is beautifully aligned with this solar eclipse. And it's not just a children's tale, especially when we see it through this eclipse. It becomes one of the sharpest psychological observations. And the Emperor surrounds himself with people who constantly reinforce the identity he wants to believe about himself. And nobody sees the clothes, but nobody dares to admit it, because the illusion has become more important than the truth. And this is what we are faced with now within our own lives, to see where we have given more power to illusion, because we are avoiding the truth, because, I don't know, maybe embarrassment or shame, because we are too identified with our fake persona. And, everyone pretends in the story. Citizens pretend, ministers pretend, even the emperor pretends. But then a child says, but he isn't wearing anything. And that child represents Leo figure in this story, because true Leo energy, it has the courage to stand in truth, even when truth threatens our status or our pride or our reputation. And under this eclipse, many illusions may dissolve in exactly that way. So this is not happening in order to embarrass us, but authenticity cannot grow if we are wearing those costumes all the time and pretending. So it's time to stop pretending, and it's time when we are discovering where importance comes from. And in the Vedic tradition, the sun is called Surya, and he is not simply just another god among many. He is the visible form of the divine. And the Vedas, they describe the sun, the Surya, as the eye of the universe, and the witness that sees everything while judging nothing. And every morning Surya rises without asking whether humanity deserves another sunrise. And he shines over temples and prisons and forests and battlefields and those who are kind and those who are cruel. He never withholds his light in order to manipulate or receive gratitude, as we would, right? And his radiance comes from his own nature and not from the reactions of those who witness it and receive it. So the sun rises because shining is what its nature is. And we want to matter, of course. We humans, we want to matter and to be important. And we want our lives to count. And we want to feel seen. And of course, there is nothing wrong with that. But the problem is when being seen becomes the source of our existence. This is, when this becomes the most important thing, to be seen by others, to get attention. And we may get desperate for that attention. And then, this is when the applause becomes the food. And we may be starving for that kind of food now, for recognition. But, we are confronting fear that without constant confirmation, we may not matter at all, or that we may disappear. And becoming ourselves really can require disappointing the image that other people have about us. And this can be heavy, of course. And it even requires disappointing the image that we have of ourselves. And this eclipse also opens a new 18 nodal cycle that I just talked about. So let's remember, of course, those of us who can remember those years when we had the last time South Node in Leo and North Node in Aquarius. And let's see what levels of maturity we've been confronted with back then. And there is another old story, Indian story about Surya, which is the sun. He rides a chariot that is drawn by 7 horses, and some see these horses as the 7 colors hidden within the sunlight, or they associate these 7 horses with the 7 meters of Vedas, but they also represent the 7 levels of consciousness through which we human beings are being awakened. And Surya is that stable center around which every experience revolves. And Western psychology often speaks about ego as if it's some enemy. But the problem is not in having ego. We need this. The problem is mistaking the ego for the whole person. The ego is a function. It helps us navigate the world, but when it becomes the king instead of a servant, this is where the suffering begins. And the worst kings demand admiration, right? So the greatest kings, they create conditions in which everyone can create and flourish and be unique and authentic and be their own kings and queens. There is no competing there. You know, do we compare our lives to everyone else's, but still pretending that we are not doing it? And you know, fire transforms everything it touches. That is why Leo, it's the fire sign ruled directly by the sun. It carries enormous creative responsibility. And fire can warm, fire can illuminate, fire can cook food, fire can guide travelers through darkness, but that very same fire can also destroy forests, houses, and burn us. So we all possess fire. And the question is what we are feeding that fire with. Is it vanity, or competition, or resentment, or generosity, or purpose, or joy, or creation, or love? You know, what ingredient is the main ingredient that we feed this fire with? And you know, what remains when the role burns away? You know, I think that's one of the most powerful questions that we are being asked now. What remains when the role is burned away? And this is a time when we are being reconnected with our souls. You know, because the very name of the sun, the soul and the center of our emotional being, the core of our being. And you know, there is a beautiful story from Puranas about Surya as well. And I chose these stories because I find them very beautifully aligned with the meaning of the leopard in us and the archetype of Leo and what it represents to its core. And this story, you know, it's something that talks about the human heart, and it begins with a woman named Sanjana. It's Hindu goddess whose name means consciousness, awareness, or true perception, and she marries Surya, the radiant sun himself, the king. And in the beginning, everything appears perfect. You know, who wouldn't want to stand beside the source of all light? But as time goes by, as time passes, Sanjana discovers something she never expected. The brilliance of Surya is so overwhelming that she can no longer bear to remain close to him. You know, his radiance is too intense and his presence is too powerful, and she begins to suffer simply because she cannot endure the fullness of his light. And instead of speaking honestly about her struggle, she makes a decision and she creates a perfect double of herself. And this is a shadow called Chaya, also known as Savarna. And this name literally means shadow. And she leaves Chaya beside Surya. And she is hoping that no one will notice the difference, and she disappears into the forest to seek refuge. And for a long time, Surya continues living with Chaya without realizing she is only a reflection. And you know, life goes on, children are born, responsibilities continue, everything appears normal from the outside, but something has changed. And the relationship doesn't have the same warmth, the same intimacy, the same truth. And you know, shadows can imitate reality very well, but they cannot replace the presence itself. And eventually Surya begins noticing subtle difference. Chaya behaves differently, she loves differently, she reacts differently, and the truth slowly reveals itself. The sun discovers that he hasn't been living with consciousness at all, he has been living with its shadow. And when Surya learns what happened, he does something unexpected too. He doesn't become angry, he doesn't punish Sanjana, he turns towards himself. And he realizes that his own radiance has become unbearable, even for those he loves. And according to the story, Surya goes to the divine craftsman Vishwakarma, who reduces the intensity of his blazing light. And the sun willingly allows part of his brilliance to be softened so that relationship becomes possible again. And I really love this story because it totally changes what most of us imagine that spiritual growth is. You know, we believe that enlightenment means becoming brighter and brighter, more powerful, more extraordinary. But this story tells us a more mature myth and story. You know, wisdom is learning how to express our light in a way that allows other people to stand beside us without being burned. And I will repeat this again, that wisdom is learning how to express our light in a way that allows other people to stand beside us without being burned. And that is a very powerful lesson for a solar eclipse in Leo. And Leo part in us naturally longs to shine. It is ruled by the sun itself, so the question is, are we inspiring people or are we overwhelming them? And you know, every one of us eventually creates Chaya, the shadow. And every one of us develops a version of ourselves that learns how to survive, how to please, how to perform, how to adapt. And Carl Jung would later call it the persona. It's not evil, it's necessary. But problems begin when the shadow remains in our place for so long that we forget where our authentic self has gone. We continue showing up through habit, through roles, through expectations, while the deeper part of us withdraws into the forest. And this is how eclipse feels, you know, for a few moments the light disappears, and this is because something hidden needs to become visible. So the South Node reveals identities that we have outgrown, roles that, you know, used to protect us. And during this eclipse, many of us may begin recognizing the difference between the self that has learned to function and the self that is actually alive. And, you know, there is another beautiful layer hidden in this story. Sanjana's name means consciousness. Chaya means shadow. And Surya is the light of the soul. And this is a story that is happening inside all of us. This is that holy trinity of the sun, the light of the soul, the source of the light, the consciousness and the shadow. And there is this ongoing dance happening all the time. And you know, we may be able to see now when we created this shadow and where is our authentic self. And you know, the shadow takes over. We continue working, speaking, smiling, achieving, succeeding. Everything appears normal from the outside, but inwardly something is different. And then eclipse comes in and interrupts that ordinary rhythm. You know, the sun is not asking us to become brighter than everyone else. That's not the point. And you know, a healthy child doesn't wake up wondering if they deserve to laugh. You know, a child laughs because joy is close to them. You know, a child paints a painting that, you know, they are not thinking if this painting will be in the gallery. You know, a child dances, you know, even if no one is watching. So we become, when we are growing older and withdrawing from that innocent part of us, we become afraid of looking foolish. And we become afraid of not being extraordinary enough. And ironically, Leo's shadow is not only pride, it's self-consciousness, the fear of being seen imperfectly. And it can become so overwhelming that we stop allowing ourselves to be seen authentically at all. And those mystery schools talked about fire in a way that actually has nothing to do with flames, but fire is understood as the principle of animation. And it's the invisible force that turns possibility into action. You know, earth gives form, water gives a feeling, air gives thoughts, and fire gives life movement. And without fire, nothing can be initiated, really. And this is, you know, why initiation tradition uses fire in every form. You know, it can be a candle or a torch or an altar flame, the sacred fire, and it represents awareness itself. You know, that's consciousness that refuses to fall asleep. And Heraclitus, he was before Socrates, philosophers, he believed that fire was the deepest principle of reality. And he wrote that the cosmos is an ever-living fire. He wasn't describing ordinary combustion, he was describing a universe that is constantly transforming itself, just as we do. You know, universe that constantly transforms itself. And Leo is not just the sign that shines. Leo is the sign that reminds us that life asks us to participate, to co-create, to awaken that fire within us, to initiate ourselves. You know, there is no other initiation but self-initiation. And, you know, fire is not theoretical. Fire has to be lived and experienced. And, you know, we cannot think our way into joy. We cannot analyze our way into creativity. And, you know, we have to step into this life and feel it with our whole heart. With our whole heart. And the sun is never silent. And it vibrates continuously. You know, sorry, the dark is coming and the camera becomes blurry and it's very hot, so my battery is very close to the end. But I hope I will finish this and say everything I wanted. So the sun is never silent, it constantly vibrates and it sings. It literally sings. And those vibrations cannot travel through the vacuum of space as ordinary sound. You know, they can be measured as oscillations within the sun itself. And many traditions speak about creation that begins with vibration, with the word, with the light that is transformed into the sound, with that om and aum, with the logos, you know, the sound before form. And this is the music of creation. You know, the whole existence and this reality is much more alive than we can perceive and understand. And this eclipse invites us to really see what joy is about. Joy is usually confused with pleasure, especially with temporary pleasures, with excitement, with entertainment, but this has nothing to do with pure joy. And, you know, pleasure really is dependent on circumstances. So, you know, we can see joy in children, you know, who are playing games and lose the track of time. And they are not creating something because it will last forever. You know, they are creating because creation itself is alive. And it brings joy. And maybe that is why Jesus in the Gospels tells his listeners that unless they become like little children, they cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. You know, these are all parables and metaphors that we need to understand in the right way. And this solar eclipse is inviting us to recover our forgotten innocence. But as I said, not that innocence that is ignorant, but innocence that comes after wisdom. And this is kind of innocence that doesn't need to prove itself or compare itself or constantly ask if it's worthy enough. You know, the sun never competes with the stars, it just rises when it is time to rise. And, you know, that's, you know, what real confidence is about. And we are not supposed to be brighter than everyone else, just to shine our own light. Sorry. And the joy cannot be manufactured. it really cannot be manufactured. There is no manual for experiencing joy. Nobody can write one. Nobody can sell one. Nobody can teach that as some formula. You know, if there was a recipe, every human being would experience happiness in exactly the same place and in the same ways, but we don't. You know, one person finds joy in planting, you know, vegetables, another finds it in solving problems, someone else finds it in restoring something. You know, everyone has their own way of finding the joy for themselves. And, you know, we have to think about those moments when hours disappear without effort, when time bends, and, you know, this is when action and awareness begin moving together. And follow your bliss. That's the message of this solar eclipse in Leo, to follow our bliss. And, you know, perhaps we are discovering some hidden gifts within us now. And, you know, we are not asked to become just happier, but to become honest and to see where our life feels alive, where we feel alive. And, you know, the sun doesn't ask flowers to justify why they bloom. You know, it just gives them light, and the blooming is their answer. So let's all sing the song of the heart. Let's sing this song of the heart. Let's remember our pure state of being that is free from the need to be seen in a way that we are not. And let's give ourselves the power to sing the song of the heart. And with this, I would end this video, and I wish us all a powerful, transformative, initiating new moon solar eclipse in Leo. See you in 2 weeks. Bye bye. Love you all.